Hello everyone. Today we'll be learning about a high yield topic, dopamine. So you have problem in movement, you have problem in remembering things, you have hyperlactation, hyperprolactinemia, you have impotence, you have gynecomastia. All these problems are somehow related with the production, hypersecretion or undersecretion of dopamine. So moving on, at first, let's see what are the functions. So, dopamine helps in the movement, memory, reward, lactation, attention, sleep pattern, nausea, and arousal. And there's so much more, and these are only the highlighted topics to be studied. So, first of all, what is dopamine? Dopamine is chemically a monoamine neurotransmitter. We can also place this under as catecholamine neurotransmitter. So how dopamine is literally formed is there is a amine called tyrosine. This tyrosine is then converted into L-DOPA, which by decarboxylation is converted to dopamine. Certain areas of brain that are very rich in dopamine. Here I have drawn a hemisection of brain for better understanding. So the areas that are rich in dopamine include substantia nigra, the ventral tegmental area, or the ventral tegmentum in some books. Then there includes some areas like hypothalamus, the olfactory bulb, and finally the retina. Now these dopamine rich area needs to supply the dopamine to all parts of the brain, and this is done by some pathways that include let me write this nigrostrial pathway, the mesocortical pathway, the mesocortical limbic pathway, and some other pathways like tubuloinfundibular pathway, the hypothalamus spinal pathway, and insertohypothalamic pathway. The pathways are nigrostrial pathway, mesocorticolimbic pathway, tubuloinfundibular pathway, hypothalamo spinal pathway, and finally insertohypothalamic pathway. So by these 5 pathways, dopamine is secreted and distributed all over the brain and body. Now let us study different pathways and what happens when the dopamine is produced in excess in that pathway, and if the dopamine is deficient in that pathway. First of all, nigrostrial pathway. We studied that nigrostrial pathway is originating from pars compacta of substantia nigra in midbrain. If dopamine is produced in excess in nigrostrial pathway, it may cause chorea, as in Huntington's disease, it may cause athetosis, as in cerebral cerebral palsy, or tics as in Tourette syndrome. So, if dopamine is produced in excess in nigrostrial pathway, it may cause chorea, athetosis, and tics, as in Huntington's disease, athetosis as in cerebral palsy, and tics as in Tourette syndrome. And if dopamine is deficient, is produced in deficient amount in nigrostrial pathway, then it may cause Parkinson's disease and extrapyramidal side effects. Note that nigrostrial pathway determines the movement of human body, is related with the movement of human body. Now moving on to the second pathway, that is the mesocortical limbic pathway, in which the function involved is mood and reward. So if dopamine is produced in excess in this pathway, then it has similar effects to that of cocaine and meth. So what happens is there is psychosis. If it is in if the dopamine is present in excess, there is psychosis, feeling of euphoria, hallucinations, and schizophrenia. And if dopamine is produced in less amount in mesocortical limbic pathway, then it may cause anhedonia. Anhedonia means the feeling of being bored all the time. And finally, the tubuloinfundibular pathway. So in what happens is, in tubuloinfundibular pathway, we must understand that dopamine inhibits prolactin production in our body. So dopamine inhibit prolactin production. So if dopamine secretion is increased, then prolactin secretion is decreased. Hence, if dopamine secretion is decreased, prolactin secretion is hence increased. Now, when this prolactin secretion is increased, it may cause hyperprolactinemia, that is the excess amount of prolactin in blood, which may lead to impotence in case of men, gynecomastia in case of men, and amenorrhea in case of women. Remember that impotence in men and amenorrhea in women. These are analogous terms. So this is a high yield question asked in many exams. For moving on to the treatment of dopamine production in excess or in deficient amount. If dopamine is produced in excess, then we treat them with antipsychotics. And if dopamine is deficient, then we treat them with a group of drugs called bromocriptine. These are antipsychotics are dopamine antagonist, whereas bromocriptine are dopamine agonists. That's it for this short course of dopamine. See you guys later. Bye.